How are you today, Dr. Palmer?
Very well.
Thank you for coming today. So can you tell me a little bit about what your goals are with the Atlas Economic Research Foundation?
Well, we have two very important tracks. One is to assist think tanks and similar organizations all around the world who do research on the harmful effects of state intervention into voluntary exchange and the beneficial effects of freeing the market, allowing people to be free to trade as they will and to live their own lives. Mm-hmm. And then secondarily, parallel to that, a very active program promoting classical liberal or libertarian or just freedom ideas in about 15 different languages, in Russian and Arabic and Chinese and Kurdish and Kiswahili and Portuguese and so on, where we have very active programs, platforms on the internet, publishing programs, videos, and so on. And that keeps us pretty busy.
Have you received any state resistance to your efforts in any parts across the world?
You mean where the state actively impedes? Well, we know that some societies are more open than others, and in working in some countries it has to be discreet, and working with people who live there, who face the consequences of stepping over certain boundaries. So I'm always very aware to listen to our local partners and make sure that I do not endanger them through some foolish thing that I might do, and to work with them. These are very, very brave people in some countries working under very difficult circumstances. But each country is different. Each political and legal system presents different obstacles. Quite frankly, one of the biggest problems is simply tariffs. It's very expensive to send things to other countries. A simple example, we did a summer school in Ghana with our local partners there on libertarian ideas for West African students. We produced a simple banner, one of these things you put behind the podium. The cost of designing, manufacturing, and shipping from the United States was less than the cost of what it took to move it 1 meter across the counter at the government's office, the customs office. So it was about $300 to design, manufacture, and ship the banner, and our local partners had to spend about $400 to liberate it from the government.
Was it our government that had the tariff, or was it?
No, that was the Ghanaian government.
The Ghanaian government.
And it wasn't merely tariffs. There are other issues involved sometimes to do business in countries like that. And I learned a lesson. Next time I go there, I just take that stuff with me in my luggage.
Yeah.
I don't ship it. So sometimes there are those kinds of obstacles that are just the stupid bureaucratic obstacles to doing anything. And it gives me a better understanding of what it is like on a daily basis to live in a highly bureaucratized, interventionist society and economy where you're constantly demanded this form, this permit. Oh, well, the permit's currently in the office, but a little bit of help might make it appear a little earlier. Mm-hmm. And that's the life that many people live around the world. I fear we may be heading a little bit in that direction in the United States as well, with increasing nationalization of industries and so on. Mm-hmm. We can expect that we'll see more of that creeping into our daily life as well.
I hope you'll forgive me for my candor on this one, but when you talk about things like free trade and spreading the ideas of free trade and ideas about tariffs and protectionism, how do you sell those ideas? I mean, how do you make that sexy? You know, how do you attract population to be interested in these kinds of ideas that seem so mundane, seem like just things that would stay within a think tank?
No, I think these have great popular appeal. The free trade movement was one of the foundations of the spread of classical liberal or libertarian ideas around the world, and for two reasons. Number one, it makes life better. When you can buy things for less, it means you're giving up less to get it, which means you have stuff left over to satisfy other wants. That's the process of economic growth. Trade creates value. Trade enriches us when it's free. And second, trade is conducive to peace. And people who have the value of peace, who understand the horrors of war, can very quickly understand that free trade leads to peace. The empirical political science evidence is overwhelming at this point. It was a key principle of the free traders of the 18th and 19th centuries to promote peace. That was their primary goal in promoting free trade. Now, the political science literature is simply overwhelming on this. If you support peace, if you want to avoid war and conflict among nations, you must support free trade. And that is a message that can be very appealing to intellectuals, to young people, to people who, for whom the flame of idealism has not been completely snuffed out. They do respond to the message of limited government, free markets, free trade, and peace.
Mm-hmm. So what is the future of free trade in the United States?
We're going through a bad period right now, and one of the reasons is because of this economic crisis. We have the same political phenomenon found every place else in the world. Who's the easiest group to blame for your problems? Foreigners.
Right.
Of course, it must be foreigners. For one thing, foreigners don't vote in your own domestic election. So you can blame the foreigners for all of our problems.
Mm-hmm.
It's too difficult to talk about the invidious role of the Federal Reserve System depressing interest rates to negative territory, June 2003 to June 2004. Real interest rates that the Fed was charging were negative, so
Mm-hmm.
people were being paid to borrow.
Right.
All of the massive intervention into the home markets, into mortgage markets, Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac and FHA and so on. That's too complicated. It's easier to say it's the Chinese. They keep sending us all this stuff.
Mm-hmm.
It must be their fault. And that is a phenomenon that is repeated all around the world.
Right. Sort of a way for governments to whip up their populations.
Right. And blame someone who doesn't live here.
Right.
Right. Well, it can't be the case that only foreigners are responsible, because all of us are foreigners to someone else. It's an incoherent explanation. But unfortunately, it is driving protectionism, this kind of uninformed populism, plus the political dynamic that foreigners don't vote in your local elections, so easy to blame them for all of your problems,
Mm-hmm.
and too difficult to look close to home. And in the American case, to look at our expansive monetary policies, intervention into credit markets, intervention into mortgage markets, and the way in which that poisoned the world financial system with all of these toxic assets, securitized assets, backed up by the U.S. government. So, there is a trend towards protectionism. There's no doubt about it. It's very worrying and very frightening, because it is not only economically irrational, it will harm our export industries drastically. The U.S. is a major exporter to the world, and we should understand that the trade relationship is, I give you something and I want something back. Mm-hmm. Right? If it's more difficult for me to sell stuff to you, it's the same as making it more difficult for you to sell stuff to me. Mm-hmm. In international trade economics, they call this the Lerner symmetry thesis. A tax on imports has in the aggregate the same impact as a tax on exports. Mm-hmm. We saw that in the 1930s with the Smoot-Hawley tariff. The U.S. put special import duties or taxes on a huge range of goods to protect American jobs.
Right.
The consequence was a devastation of all of the American export industries, which were huge. So U.S. exports declined within 1 year by about 50%. If this happens again, we can expect similar results.